Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Stefan Grobe and I'm joined now by the Ambassador of Japan, Mr. Katsuo Kodama. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming to our studio. And we will be talking, of course, about the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan, which will take place on June 28th and 29th in a couple of days. This is the first time that Japan hosts the G20 summit. And it comes at a very interesting time politically. There are a lot of global problems. There's the issue of trade, the issue of e-commerce, of climate change, and many more. So is Osaka a kind of crisis summit?
Well, thank you, Stefan, for having me in this program. Well, already I think you said it all. I think you identified three, I would say, the major agenda items to be discussed at Osaka summit. That actually, these are the priority issues I think Prime Minister Abe really would like to put sharp focus on. But you ask, is this a crisis management summit? Well, I would rather not say so, because you see, I have been lucky to attend the very first 4 G20 Leaders Summit. Those summits were really, I think, crisis management summit. After all, against the backdrop of the global financial crisis, which caused the huge drop in the global trade and also global domestic products, I think, which caused, I think, what we call the global great recession of the global economy. But on the other hand, I think, although we are not faced with such imminent, I think, financial or the Great Recession kind of type crisis, but of course, yes, trade remains one of the hottest issue against the backdrop of the ongoing looming, I think, protectionism tendency, also ongoing, I think, bilateral trade wars as such. So we have to revamp what we call the WTO trading rules, I think. After all, WTO is the centerpiece of our commitment to the rules-based international trading order.
You've mentioned the United States and China, and both countries are at the brink of a trade war that is somehow looming. On the other hand, we have the European Union and Japan, who are a shining example of multilateralism and now creating the biggest trade bloc in the world. What can these two sides, Japan and the EU, do to convince the other G20 members to move forward with a rule-based multilateral system?
Well, indeed, I think, yes, the February the 1st of this year, Japan, EU, really epoch-making economic partnership agreement entered into force, which actually created the free trade area of 30% of global GDP, of also the 40% of global trade are conducted by these countries, EU and Japan. And then also let's remind ourselves that I think I checked 86% of global GDP is produced by G20 members. But also 54% of global GDP is produced by actually G7, including EU, Japan, US, Canada. So I think if the like-minded countries, especially Japan and EU, are united and in this kind of meeting, and then to take a lead in, of course, promoting the great cause of free and, of course, fair trade, I think, emphasizing the importance of the rules-based trade order, I think we can make a difference. So that's all the more, I think, Prime Minister Abe looks forward to having Mr. Tusk and Mr. Juncker in Osaka. And then already in the last summit meeting, which took place here in Brussels, I think on the April the 25th, I think already Mr. Juncker and Mr. Tusk conveyed their wholehearted moral support to Prime Minister Abe that, Shinzo, you can count on us in the forthcoming Osaka G20 summit.
Somehow in the shadow of the trade conflict is the issue of e-commerce and cybersecurity.
Yes.
What is your assessment? How important is the issue, and what can we expect from Osaka going forward?
Indeed. The Prime Minister Abe back in January this year in Davos, unveiled his vision of what he called DFFT, data free flow with trust. Now, I think this is, we think also, maybe Europeans also think rather a little bit overdue, because we have to do something to navigate this explosive, I think, trade and economic activities in digital trade or digital economy, I think, globally. And then, of course, number one priority is that somehow we have to ensure a freer, a smoother trade of data, I think. But there is a other side of the coin, I think, negative, I think, yes, problems, including a privacy protection, and then also personal data, data protection, IPR, intellectual property rights protection, as well as cyber security. So, but unfortunately, we haven't no international kind of agreement or regulatory framework based on which I think we somehow regulate to ensure that these problems will occur. So that's why I think Prime Minister, with this concept of DFF, data free flow with trust, he would like to kickstart a meaningful discussion at the highest political level.
I want to talk about the issue of climate change,
yes.
Which has become bigger and bigger since the last G20 meeting. We've seen on a global level a lot of protests by young people in Europe and elsewhere. Diplomatically, the issue is a little in limbo since the United States walked away from the Paris Climate Accord. Yet many countries have promised to stick to the agreement. Even in the United States, there are states that are opposed to the federal government, pledging to respect climate goals. How can we move forward here, and what can the Osaka summit do to put this issue back on the right track? And is there something like hope that we can achieve something similar than Paris?
Well, Stefan, you really asked me a very difficult question to answer. This remains one of the difficult international issues, of course, because of the U.S. position on this issue. And however, I think, 2 years ago, I think Chancellor Merkel hosting the G20 summit in Hamburg, and last year also in Buenos Aires in Argentina, I think we have been continuing to, ensure this the Paris 2015 Accord will be implemented in a fullest manner. I mean, all of us are committed ourselves, kind of a voluntary commitment, but also under the peer review, we have to make sure that our commitment will be implemented. So the next important time will be 2020. So next year. So we have to really, I think, accelerate our efforts. Now, I must say, of course, I think there is a definite, I see in Europe, sense of crisis and also sense of urgency. But I must say, maybe important thing is that we have to ensure that all the UN member states, 193, 94, I think, the leaders also, they have to share the same magnitude of sense of crisis and also sense of urgency. But somehow it may be still lacking. So I think, of course, again, I said 86% of GDP is created by G20 leaders who will gather in Osaka. I'm sure Prime Minister Abe will make his plea to these leaders, including Mr. Putin and Mr. Modi of India, Mr. Xi Jinping of China, and also Mr. Trump, of course. We have to really, expedite our, efforts to rein in this climate change, negative aspect.
So these summits is a place where the big powers come together, but it's also a meeting where the actual leaders get together.
Indeed.
And we have quite a colorful assembly of characters here. Now, with Mr. Trump attending, there's always room for a surprise and other things. Your Prime Minister Abe, is on very good personal terms with Donald Trump. Does that give Japan a kind of a lead role in mastering the United States, sort of representing the rest of like-minded countries, as you said?
Well, I would say, of course, the Prime Minister Abe, of course, I think will discharge his duty as the president of the G20 summit in Osaka. Already in his capacity as the chair or the president of the G20 Leader Summit, he can do a lot, I think, behind the scenes or in the plenary session, whatever. But then in order to do so, I think his closeness, his great chemistry with Mr. Trump, I'm sure will help him a lot to, well, I don't think he will self-declare that I can be an interlocutor for you with Mr. Trump. I don't think he will, of course he will not do so, but I think he will be sensible enough to, I'm sure, to play that kind of role in effect, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Ambassador Kodama, thank you very much for this
that's
conversation.
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.